Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
If you're a fan of comic books and comic book conventions, Daytona Beach Comic Con needs to be on your list of must-attend events. It's a show that actually focuses on comic books. Imagine that! This year's event is happening on Saturday, September the 6th, and Sunday, September the 7th. Silverline creators will be there, so we'll see you at the show. If you find yourself in the Orlando area, and let's be honest, doesn't everyone come to Orlando for the House of Mouse? Head over to Coliseum of Comics to get your comic book fix. Be sure to check out their location on East Colonial Drive, where they carry a wide selection of independent comics, including Silverline books. Stop by and don't forget to tell them Silverline sent you. Hey, if you're an independent comic creator looking to get your comic printed, look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our comics and do a fantastic job. They can even print special edition covers. When you reach out to them, be sure to tell them Silverline sent you. Looking for a bold way to boost your business? Advertise with Silverline Comics, reaching readers across the U.S. and around the world. Affordable rates, passionate fans, and national and international exposure, all packed inside thrilling, action-packed comics. All ads must be PG-13, perfect for reaching all ages. Spots are limited. Grab your ad space today and become part of the adventure. Silverline Comics, where adventure lives and your brand thrives. Email us at silverlinepublishingllc@gmail.com for more information. And make mine Silverline.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to That Silverline Show on Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim TK, joined as always by Jose Fuentes.
Hello, everybody.
David Rios.
Hello.
And Ron Fortier.
Howdy, y'all.
Howdy, everyone. And as mentioned last week, 2 weeks ago or so, I had COVID, and it's still causing a lingering cough, so I at some point may just die on my microphone. So if I have to turn away to cough or mute myself, don't worry about it. Tonight's topic is going to be talking about the single issue story. It's going to be the art of crafting one narrative that's completed in one issue, not taking 4 to 6 to be told in a volume. But before we get into all of that, we do have some housekeeping. And that Rejects number 2 is currently live on fundmycomic.com. Of course, you can head on over there. We're on the front page. And like I said, all of our comics before are completed, before we take them live on any sort of crowdfunding or pre-order phase. So this is just a way to pre-order a already completed comic in a way that helps us mitigate the cost of printing and gives us better analytics. You can also get your slew of options here, different covers, as well as add-ons if you need to catch up on any back issues, or if you want to go ahead and pick up some original art. We still have some interior pages as well as covers available for pickup. Rejects is, of course, a story about a super team that would be classified somewhere below D. These are Not the heroes you want to save today, but sometimes that's all you have. So, if you want a funny, action-filled romp, head over to fundmycomic.com and place your pre-order for Rejects number 2. And if you missed issue 1, number 1, you can add that to the pickup as well. We are getting some static from somewhere in there. I'm going to try and mess in on some audio stuff. Okay, I think it's coming from Ron's mic. Yeah. So we'll figure that out. Let's see if I can adjust some stuff real quick here.
For a minute there, I thought it was me, just because we got a storm rolling in. It's Florida, and we've entered the rainy season.
Right, yeah.
Well,
Okay.
so nothing for me. So
Yeah. It's somewhere in Ron's mic, and I can't. We don't have a way to do noise reduction on that from our end, so we'll hopefully get that figured out. But maybe say maybe just be a loose cable or something. But we will continue on. Like I said, tonight we're talking about the single issue story. So for a lot of us, that's how I think that was it, because now I think it's a lot better. There are Silverline Comics in one self-contained 22, or I guess now the advent of digital media and whatever, 22 to whatever page count you so choose, comic. But I think we'll try to keep it focused on the idea of telling a story in a single floppy before getting into the way you can do things digitally now, and doing either scrolling comics or print on demand trades. But if you are a first-time comic creator and want to get into telling your own stories, one of the best ways you can do so is to get with someone you can collaborate with and put together your own trade, and just send it off to a print on demand publisher. And of course, we are getting praise for Jose on Count Mass Vipers. Okay, so I'll open up the floor first and ask Ron, as well as our art team, have you guys worked on a story that was just one self-contained narrative, either a monster of the month type deal, or just a property that only lasted for one issue, and that was the goal, was just to have one issue of story?
I don't think I've ever worked on a single issued story, to be honest with you. I think they're kind of cool. The idea, I'm not a writer, but to me, the idea of writing everything in one, and keeping it all compact into 22, 24 pages, that is just magical, and I don't even know how you could do that. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Well, to me, the idea is, again, all right, when I started reading comics, going back to the 50s and into the 60s, all right, all comics were single issue comics, all right, and even at that time, up until, like I said, the 60s, DC and Timely and Atlas and all the other companies prior to Marvel coming on the scene, all you get is a single issue comic book. If you had a Superman title, that's what you got. You got one story. And so I grew up reading comics expecting that. The only time you didn't get a single, story, and this is, again, even as amazing as this sounds, all right, is when you got anthology comics like war comics or westerns, and you had multiple stories. You had 2 or 3 stories in a single issue that featured different characters, all right? So that was my experience with what comics were all about. Now, along comes, Marvel and DC, and in the 60s, and they start introducing all these new titles and characters. But keep in mind, Stan Lee and the folks at DC were still doing single issues. I mean, you'd get like Fantastic Four #1, and it was the origin story. Okay, that was it. Now, when you came back to issue #2, Lee was smart enough to continue the concept, i.e., they're getting adjusted to their powers, like we talked about last week, and they're still in civilian clothes, and they're getting adjusted to this. But again, it was a little like, Tim alluded to, monster of the week kind of thing. So that by the second issue, the story's done. You come back to issue #3, and it's again another different storyline, but a continually plot thread along. Now they got costumes, we get the fantastic car. And that was the formula that Lee used on all the stuff they created. Spider-Man, single issues. Then it was villain of the month. Iron Man, origin, single issue. Then it's villain of the month. Thor, single issue. Then it's villain of the month. And you go with this for like about a year, 2 years, before you get the Avengers. You get the Avengers, and then all of a sudden, it's like, well, let's have a longer storyline. And now this doesn't wrap up because we got too many characters, so we got to have a lot more story to tell. And on we go to continuing stories, 2, 3, 4, 5 issues. And I don't know if that wasn't a plague in and of itself, because it strikes me that I think there's very few writers out there today who grasp the idea or the concept of being able to tell a story from beginning, middle, and end in 22 to 24 pages. I mean, when I started breaking into the business, it was always short stories. All the stories that I had published before I got my contracts doing Green Hornet and Terminator were basically 8-page stories that I would sell to anthologies. So I came into this learning how to do short stories. And if there's anybody watching this in this particular episode who wants to learn how to get into the business as a writer, I recommend learning how to write shorts. Yeah. Because it totally trains you in that whole concept of telling a complete story, all right, in as brief a time as possible. One of the things about that was, like, when I got the contract for Terminator, that was an ongoing series. So I basically jumped in, like issue #9 or whatever, read the first 8, seen what the other writer had done, and jumped in and continued where they were going. Now, with the Green Hornet, I sold him on this property and with a presentation package that was going to have this long origin, i.e., we were setting up the legacy thing, where we were going to have the old Green Hornet, the TV Hornet, and then finally our guy. And that took 7 issues to tell. But the second that 7th issue was done, then it fell on my shoulders to say, okay, so what do I give them next? And I had just written a 7-issue arc. So I jumped back onto what I knew and literally started doing Villain of the Month. The next Green Hornet, #8, was 1 story. #9 was 1 story. All right. Now, a lot of people might think that's not a lot to work with. But the flip side of all this is, way back when I broke into the business, all right, one of the first short stories I ever sold was the comedy superhero, Mr. Jigsaw, Man of 1,000 Parts. For something like 20 years, Gary Carter and I just kept knocking off short 8-page stories until we decided to collect all of them and start bringing him back in his own series. Okay, so we reprint all the shorts in the first 3 issues of Mr. Jigsaw. And now I got to sit down and write issue #4. And I'm sitting there thinking about it more and more after 20 years of writing shorts. And I went, well, if this is going to be, the debut of the new Mr. Jigsaw series, pretty much, even though it's issue #4, right? We get a guy named Nick Runge, who works out in Hollywood these days making movie posters. He gives us a Mr. Jigsaw who's based on Adam Sandler, and his girlfriend Amy is based on Terry Hatcher. It's one of the best covers that Indie Planet ever did. So says Barry Blakely, right? I wanted to do a full 24-page Mr. Jigsaw story, which I had never, ever done. And believe me, it became a challenge to stretch out what's basically a fun comedy character that works in those 8-page limits, to stretch that to 3 times its normal length. And I came up with this goofy plot idea of them going to Hollywood and they're going to make a superhero movie based on Mr. Jigsaw, and ended up writing this, The Phantom of Studio B, or whatever the title was. So again, that was the flip side of, wow, okay, sometimes writing 24 pages with one idea can be an extreme challenge. So it's, again, how you come at this and what perspective you look at it.
Yeah. To kind of that same point, I got my start in writing doing flash fiction, and that's what I sold originally, was just 1,000-word stories. And that also helps you, I think, when you go to write longer projects, see whether it be 22 pages or 12 issues, is it helps you a lot in terms of developing your middle, because that's always the classic stereotype, right? Is writers are really good at beginnings, really good at endings, but getting between the two can be a little rough. But if you're thinking about everything as a 1,000-word story, and you're just, each one is a sequel to the other, right? So when I wrote my first novel, I was thinking of each chapter is its own story, and then the next chapter is just a sequel to that. So like it should have, each chapter should have a beginning, middle, and end, and then the next chapter is a sequel. So Soul Senate, when that comes out, it's an arc style comic, right? So it's 4 issues in a volume telling an arc, where like the big bad is whoever at the end. However, each issue is resolving one crisis as part of that. Yep. So you're treating it as stepping stones, and then you just kind of take that same philosophy to when you're doing a character that maybe only exists for 22 issues. They may have a grander story, they may have something going on, and if you've done world building, they'll probably will have a story that exists outside the comic that is only in your head. But you're still resolving one crisis as part of that story in this volume.
Right. I mean, one of the first jobs that I ever got, all right, was like, as I was, mentioning, I had sold all these shorts strips, all right, including the first Mr. Jigsaw and a bunch of other stuff to Charlton Comics and other. I sold a short horror story to Eclipse Comics out in the West Coast. And by then, I had started to make a name for myself, all right, as, new kid on the block kind of thing, which predicated the fact that one day I get this call from Bob Palin out of Rhode Island saying, hey, I'd like you to write a Popeye comic for me. All right. It's like, catches me totally off guard, right? And again, the idea being here is he's the publisher, and all he wants is one story. He doesn't want anything continuing on it. He just wants one comic book, 24 pages, telling one story of Popeye. And I probably would have run for the hills, all right, as far as trying to get that done, had it not been for the fact that ultimately, in our back and forth over a couple of days over the phone, I suggested the possibility of writing an origin story, which I knew if I researched the character, his background and history, I could do for hopefully a modern audience and put my own little spin on some of this. But again, paying homage to everything else that I'd done with this classic character. The minute they gave me the green light and said, yeah, you can do an origin story, then I had more than ample material for 24 pages of story. And it worked out like a gem. It's still one of those comic books that I'm really proud of and really happy about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I felt when I got offered Dracula. Dracula's a terrible example for this, because we have to do that one as an epic, because there's no way you can turn that novel and how much material is in there into just one issue without cutting huge swaths.
Right.
But I'm like, but stoked on vampires. But to get into an example that everyone in our audience has probably seen, a version of this is our annual Vampire the Masquerade games that we do on stream. And then I craft that as a standalone episode in essentially what is now a 3-year TV show. Where every year we put out, essentially it turns out to like a 3-year movie of us playing the game, and telling a story about, and I know that there's going to be about 5 plot points, and we're going to start with something that is a point where anyone can jump into. It may be influenced by stuff that happened in the past, but it should be by itself. A point where anyone can jump in and understand who these characters are, what the conflict is, and where we're going from here. And should end at a point where everyone leaves going, okay, I can see where there's some strings, but I feel like we resolved everything that was brought up. That's kind of what Brandon Sanderson talks about when he talks about creating your first book. Is everyone wants to write this big epic, but what you should do is you create your first book with the anticipation that that is the only published material you're ever going to have in your life. So put everything you have into it and know that it's going to be a complete beginning, middle, end. And when the publisher asks you to come back and do something else, that's just icing on the cake.
Right, and at the same time, and I love that train of thought. It's easily to pick up on. At the same time, you can pepper a plot with little hints about what could be another plot, and just basically, just Easter egg, drop them in the background where they're not all that important, but they're there. So that, you do that single issue and everybody goes, oh, that's great. And hey, can you come back and give me another one? And all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, okay, let's go mine that little thing we threw off to the side. All right. And that's when I was doing Boston Bombers for Caliber Press. That was going to be a 5-issue miniseries and be done and gone. 5 issues, finish, wrap it up. But it was enough material that as I was writing it, I began to realize that I had such a potential with my characters, with tons of other stories that we could follow through. So I started literally hiding in that major plot one particular element that I was just curious the readers would pick up on, i.e. the fact it wouldn't change the main plot. We got to issue 5 and there was culmination. It was the end. People could buy it, go away. And if I never came back and did another one ever again, all well and good. Mm-hmm. All right. Kicker is, though, I added those elements of there's more story here. And that's basically what you're doing, but doing it subliminally in certain ways. Okay. The book gets done. All 5 issues are done. Rob Davis collects them. We start selling them, at cons all the time, sell it on Amazon and Indie Planet or whatever. And one day, Rob and I are at a con, and we're having breakfast together. And Ron looks at me and goes, you ever going to write Boston Bombers again? And I just looked at him. And by now, it's been like 25 years. And I went, what do you mean, write it again? He goes, I got the clues. I know there's more story here, right? And so for the next 5 or 6 years, he continuously bugged the hell out of me, all right? You've got to write the second one. You've got to finish the story. And that was the art of telling a story where there's more, all right? But you don't tell the primary plot issue about that. You have to give your readers a sense that, hey, I've got it all. But now, surprise, surprise, finally, after being pestered by Rob, I finally turned around and said, okay, I'll tell you what. I said, this is going to be a chore because I'm going back to a world that I left 25 years ago. If I do this thing, and I do know what that second story is, I said, the only way I do it is if I get your commitment that you're going to be the artist. Mm-hmm. We shook on it, and that's it. We published the first 2 issues of Volume 2. And Rob's got Volume 3. I've finished Volume 4. I've got one more script. And ultimately, people are going to get Boston Bombers Volume 2, the complete finish of what I had hinted at 25 years ago.
Sneaky.
Oh, you have to. You fall in love with these characters, and Tim will tell you. I mean, once you get to know who these characters are, all right, there is so much to each and every one of them. But in the story you're telling, you can only tell that story and their reaction, and that's their experience in life. But the opportunity to go back to those characters, even years later, and examine other aspects of their characters, their motivations, and why did you even, create them in the first place? That's exciting. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's also one of the things where if you're doing truly single issue stories, but do it, that keep it with the same character, that's how, like you said, how comics started is, and also, I mean, in other examples, that's how James Bond works. Is you create one character that you have a complete backbone for and you want to explore in different settings. And each story is just you picking them up and putting them in a different conflict or putting them in a different situation.
Right.
And so you still have some sense of continuity just in the sense that it's the same character, but in reality, it's each time you're crafting something completely new. And that also gives you a lot of freedom in terms of developing those conflicts. Because you're creating something that is concise and only going to happen in this one microcosm. You're not beholden to stretch it out for, a year-long contract. And I also think about, I mentioned him on our previous episode, but the director of the most recent Final Fantasy games, Yoshi P, the way he talks about writing, kind of the same way that we're talking about Ron, where you leave threads dangling. But he does what he calls writing retroactively, where as he writes, he'll naturally have threads because just kind of is something you do to allude to world building is you'll leave threads because that allows the audience to kind of imagine the world beyond the scope of whatever the narrative is. So that way they feel like there's more depth and there's more happening there outside the story, and you make the world feel more full that way. But once you get to a point where now you want to continue, you can look back at what you did, say like, okay, that thread that I've dangling over there, we're actually going to pull on that now and work from there. And by the end of it, you might get something, I believe Infinity War is also written the same way, in the Infinity Gauntlet saga, where it was, by the end of it, this is like one of the first times of having a mass crossover event. And for comic fans, this is a mind-blowing thing that happened. But in reality, it was, by the time we got to the end of it, the writers were like, what happened in Adam Warlock number 3? Can we pull that? Okay, we're going to pull that.
Hey, continuity is a bitch. All right, man, it's a bitch. All right, because you can fall into that trap so fast. All right, that I mean, if you're Marvel and DC and you've got 70, 80 years of material to draw from, all right, I mean, there's going to be a fan out there who's going to catch you flat-footed every single time. All right. What do you mean Superman's left-handed? Back in 1950, he was batting right-handed. All right. How am I supposed to know that? All right. Give me a break. All right. But they will. They will. All right. It's like everything's got to be absolutely perfect and just the way it was in all those issues and whatever. And it's like, oh, save us, please. All right. That hill of beans comes down on top of you real fast, believe me. All right. So it's like, hey, just enjoy the story and move on. Just enjoy the story.
How hard is it as a writer to, when you add those little cliffhangers in your single issue story, and how hard is it to just stop there? I mean, I know sometimes I get a little bit OCD about stuff. I'm just like, I've got to clean that line up. No, you're right. I can't move on with the page until I clean that little spot up. Sometimes I get a little tweaky like that. Is it the same way when I know you purposely plan out those little cliffhangers, but you just get like an itch? I have to finish.
Well, so sometimes you do, Jose, but other times it's intuitive to the storytelling. All right. Because, I mean, to me, the idea with Boston Bombers was, in writing it, I had my cast of heroes and villains, all right, and pretty much set in my mind, because I wrote that thing wicked fast. That was 5 issues, and I think I wrote all 5 within 2 weeks.
Wow.
That's how fast that story burned in my head. It was like I was tapping into that other world, right? And so these characters come alive to me, and I'm writing. And as I'm getting near the climax, all of a sudden, it's because the characters were so vibrant and had so much background material, anything you want to call it, all right, that suddenly there was this like I set myself up without realizing it, till the realization came to me that one of the good guys was actually related to one of the bad guys. And the minute that clicked in my head, I mean, I'd already written like 3 issues. And suddenly it caught me off guard. It was like my subconscious, I was writing consciously, but my subconscious was going, okay, and this is where they came from. This is really where he came from. This is where and I'm like, it was there all along. All right. That's the magic of writing. That's why I love writing so much. All right. Then allowed me 2 issues to play with that. And that was the hidden gem. Okay. So there's a point where you get to the last issue, and almost in the last couple pages, one of the authority figures in the story makes a comment to the effect of, well, I hope my sons are all right. And I purposely put sons plural. Now, anybody reading that would have known he only has one son, supposedly, the good guy. But no, he has 2 sons, and he knows he has 2 sons. That's not a slip of his tongue. And so that's that thing that you slide out of there, all right? A lot of people never caught it. They just thought it was a typo. They just thought Ron wrote sons instead of
read
son.
right on through.
Right, and they finished the story, all right? Now, going back 25 years later, it's like going back in time, and now you're going to see the story, the backstory, all right, which is like 10 times more powerful and dramatic than what they got the first time out. But again, I didn't know if I'd ever come back and write it again.
Right.
I didn't know, and basically it died after the first 5 issues because we lost the artist and there was all kinds of grief and problem. So I'm happy I got those done. I'm happy they're there. All right. But yeah, talk about haunting for 25 years. That story's not finished in my head, maybe to my readers, but not to me.
Right.
All right. But is there enough interest to ever come back and do it again? And God bless Rob Davis, all right? Because Rob caught it. Rob caught that little son to sons and put it together, all right? He's a smart dude, right? And he goes, you got to tell that story. That story's fantastic. So yeah, so that is egging and urging. I mean, I'm sitting there. I literally had, when we're talking about continuity, I'm sitting there with the first graphic novel as I'm sketching out the second one, because I got to keep going back to see what I did here, what I did there, so that again it all fits together, right? And we're having a blast. We're having a good time with it. Rob's doing such a great job with the artwork, and like I said, it's like going home again to friends and family. All right. I mean, you guys know I'm currently going through some medical treatments these days. All right, every single day. And I'm talking to a nurse the other day about Superman, and the offshoot of all that is I basically end up telling her that I'm into comics and I write comics. Well, lo and behold, her husband's a big collector. She was too when they're in high school and all that. So she's all wound for sound, and she wants to know what I've written, where she can get some of my comics, blah, 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 right? And at one point she goes, because I'm telling her I've got most of the stuff's up at Amazon, pretty much. And so I'm naming off titles of stuff I've done. And she comes back to me and looks at me and she goes, well, what's your favorite? And again, it's that, okay, I mean, hey, that's like saying, who's your favorite child?
Right.
Yeah, I can't do that. All right. Everything I've written is my favorite. All right. So I basically told her, okay, well, I like this a lot. I like that. Anyways, so went back to
my kids will tell you that my favorite child is my cat Jupiter.
God bless her heart. I went back in there today, and as they were setting me up, she turned around and said, I ordered a couple of your books off Amazon. She goes, so
Nice.
you're going to sign them for me, right? I said, of course I am. Thank you. I said, it's really nice of you. So there you go.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who exactly gave me this advice. They're an older writer who passed away, but I think it was but it was part of like a lecture thing. But thinking about continuing those like cliffhangers and those moments where you either create trails or create anything like that. Their advice in general for writing was whenever writing, make sure to stop once you get really hot. Like once you know exactly, like you feel like you're on a tear, you know exactly what's going to happen, you can go page for page. That's the moment when you need to stop and then come back to it the next day and pick it from there. Because you're already going to come into it a little bit warmed up because you know exactly what's going to happen on, but also gives you a moment to think about those cliffhangers or their strings and say, oh, actually, this would be really good if we hold on to it for later. Or wait, what if we did this to subvert it? As opposed to when you're in the moment, your brain's probably just going to carry on and do the anticipated resolution of it. But if you take that moment to stop when you get hot and come back to it and get into it warm, it's going to allow you to handle those cliffhanger moments or those additional plot threads in a way that will give you additional depth, an unexpected twist to it, or just a plan for longevity to pull it forward. And so that was something that I did a lot with Soul Ascendant and with Dracula. Especially like Dracula's page by page thing is going through and knowing, I get to a point where I'm building up to a big scare or a big reveal or something big happening on the page. And that's the one where I stop. I'll come back to it later. So much so that I did that with most of the dialogue, where now I'm going through and doing the dialogue in issue 2. And after the panel descriptions have already been sent off to Rob, but now I'm actually writing the dialogue in some of it. I did placeholders, so you get the idea of like what their emotions should be like on their faces. But now I'm going back and actually doing the dialogue, pulling from the strings that I saw in there, and as well as making it more in line with the dialogue in the book itself.
Let me ask you this, Tim, because this is a trick that I use every now and then, and I more so lately. I think, there's two ways of getting into a project. I mean, you can work for somebody who says, "Okay, go ahead and write this," and doesn't give you a page count, and says, well, how long is this supposed to be? And they turn around and say, as long as you want it to be. You give me 30 pages, I'll publish 30 pages. Give me 40, I'll publish 40. That's both a blessing and sometimes it's a curse.
Yeah.
Because you don't rein yourself in and you can lose track of stuff. Whereas you work for a company that says, well, I want 24 pages. That's what you got to give me, 24 pages. I don't care if it's a mini series or whatever, but each issue has to be 24 pages. So a long time ago, this go back to when I was working for Now, even on Green Hornet and Terminator. I literally made up a sheet of basically blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 22 pages, 24. And as I would write from day to day, at the end of the day, I would cross off a block. So that when I came back the next morning and went over the text of what I'd done the day before, clean it up, add stuff, take stuff away, visually, aside from just my mind, visually, I saw, I got 7 white blocks left. This is it. This is what finishes, so it geared me. Sometimes I would take that sheet of blocks and I would just write over them in pencil. All right. Like over the top section and go, okay, these scenes have to get done within X number of pages. This middle part has to have X number of pages. And I have to have enough to wrap this up or whatever. So that Xing off as I go from day to day helps me to keep things corralled in that particular, fashion, and hopefully write something decent. Now, like any other, creative endeavor, there are days when it's like pulling teeth. There are days when I'm trying to write through a middle section of a book and I'm not getting any ideas. The stuff I've already set up is okay, but I need a push, I need a breakthrough, I need something different, a twist that'll excite the story, whatever. And I find a lot of times what you're talking about is that either when I've had a good day or a bad day writing, sometimes I can be wide awake in the middle of the night, bugged by that question, to the point of, sitting up in bed and suddenly realizing, okay, this is a solution, right? And then I can't wait to get up the next morning and run back to my office and say, okay, I slept on it, and here's how it answers. All right. But I'm always aware of wanting to entertain my readers and understanding the visual, essence of a comic book, that you're going to have so many talking heads, but man, you've got to have a balance. You've got to have a balance with the action. All right. Because if all you're going to do is talking heads, then go write a short story, fan fiction, flash fiction, novels, or whatever. But comics demand that balance of action and talking heads. And sometimes it comes naturally and organically, and other times you have to set it up. You have to mechanically grab the bull by the horns and say, nope, this has to happen here.
Yeah. And I mean, to kind of pull on that, I always try to treat the story as it's going to be as long as the story needs it to be. And then if I can make that fit within page count, great. But if the publisher just has like a paid per page count, I'm going to give them the Lord of the Rings, right? How much extraneous detail can I put in this? I think of two different things. One is a breaking style that I learned from Delilah Dawson, and then the other one is the classic writing video lecture that the creators of South Park did, which they explain how to tie beats together. Is that every beat should lead into the next one with either but or therefore. If at any point a beat in the story goes into the next one with and, then you've lost all tension in the episode, or in this case, the issue. So every time that a beat resolves in the story, the next beat that follows it should either be this happens, but this happens, or this happens, therefore this happens. And then Delilah Dawson essentially expanded that into thinking about that now in chapter format, or in the case of a comic book, issue format, where it's, if it's one issue, then you're probably not going to expand on that too much. You're just going to do so many things. Understanding going to be about 22 pages, and each page should lead into the next one with but or therefore, and you get 22 moments of change. If you're writing something longer form, you might take that to 11 points of change in one issue, but one issue should resolve, and then the next issue should also be a but or therefore. And so when I'm doing a lot of pre-writing, which I noted that even for a comic writer, I have a rather extraneous pre-writing process that I took over from writing shorts and flash, in particular short sequences that got put into anthology. But with Dracula again, Dracula I broke over 4 issues. And so each issue I had one major point, the point of change, where this issue starts here and ends here, and they should be diametrically opposed points in the narrative in some way, either for a character or for the conflict itself. And each one needs to go, issue 1 ends here, therefore issue 2 starts here. Issue 2 ends here, but issue 3 it starts here. Issue 3 ends here, therefore issue 4 starts here. And then I go into each issue and I'll break it down page by page. And essentially what I'll do, part of my pre-writing is I'll write a Marvel script. I'll write a full Marvel script as the pre-write. Which, if I was doing something like Soul Ascendant, I could probably get away with just doing the Marvel script. Doing Dracula, I felt the need to then also do a DC style script, or the full script, because it is a talking head style story. And so in order to inject conflict like that, you also need to inject action. Sometimes you need to do strictly movement-based action or scene-based action, something like the Illuminati comics do, where there might not necessarily be a physical altercation in the comic, but there is a emotional, intelligent altercation that you then need to visually represent in some way.
Yeah,
You know,
right. Now, I
classic-
mean, yeah, I get it. I got to bring this up, Tim, because what you're talking about, what you're saying, you're right. Dracula's talking heads. It is totally talking heads,
Yeah.
right? Unlike the movies that were made, right? So the key here is the trick that we comic writers have in understanding that, all right, is that we can disguise that
Mhm.
because of the art. All right.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're working easily one of the best visual storytellers in the business today. All right. I know this. I mean, you know, I'm one of Rob's biggest fans, and the current issue that we're doing of Boston Bombers Volume 2 that he is now drawing, that issue number 3 was 75% talking heads. All
Mhm.
right. I mean, writing it, I mean, I felt like, oh, this is, but I couldn't get out of it. There's no way I have to tell the story with talking heads. All right.
Yeah.
I say that, but then it's like, okay, well, let's dress up the backgrounds.
Mhm.
Let's dress up the locales. Let's dress up what's going on around the people talking, the talking heads. Let's find ways, blah, blah, blah. And then give it to Rob, and the visuals come back, and it's a trick. People don't get that he's making it visually exciting when it's really not. All right. Let me clue you in on Elmer Bernstein. All right, one of the best music movie composers in Hollywood. Right. He gets hired to write the music score. Okay, to a new Western called The Magnificent Seven with Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, all these guys, right? So they give him a rough cut viewing of the film, right? And he looks at it, and for like the first 60 minutes of this movie, nothing happens except people come together. There's a few little shootout pieces, but I mean, they're minuscule, all right? And there's nothing to get the fan base audience to move, to get the blood going, the people sitting in the theater. Okay, what's he do? He comes up with that stupid Marlboro theme thing. So now you watch the movie and you watch Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, the Mexican people come and hire them from this Texas, and they keep adding people till they've got 7. Right? Brenner holds up his hands. We've got 7. Now we're going to this Mexican town, and they get on their horses. And if you're in the theater like I was the first time I saw that, right, you're like almost ready to fall asleep when all of a sudden, as they're riding, you get dun 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 dun. There's nothing happening, but he's giving us action movie, drama movie. Dun 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 dun. And now you're all sitting up and go, oh, something's going to happen now. Listen to that music, all right? That's what comic book artists do. When we give them these talking head scripts, all right, they visually give us that beat that's really phony to the degree of what's going on, but it works, all right? And man, like I said, you get pros like Rob Davis or all the people I've worked with, Jeff Butler, and all the other great artists I've worked with. It's just amazing what they can do with that.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of get to to grab some opinions from Jose and David here. Like one of the things that on that same way that I always go back to is I need to go through and read the new X-Men series, the yellow one that essentially is X-Men Illuminati. But in like the old Illuminati or old 2000s Illuminati run, there were a lot of issues where it was essentially the people at the table trying to out-chess each other.
Yeah.
And so you'd have moments where it'd be Reed says something, Black Panther says something, Strange says something, a shadow casts over Reed's face. It cuts to an image of Black Panther's mind of how he is now moving something off the board. Then it goes to, Strange visualizing something else or like doing something in the background. And so these moments where like just even playing with shadows or colors on the page can add that dramatic thing to illustrate the mental conflict that is now happening. I mentioned before, I love Euro comics, and that's why we did Wolf Hunter in the style of a French comic where the palette is non-realistic. It is an emotionally driven color palette. So he has a realization. There's a flash of red. He has, there's a moment happening, and suddenly the cart turns from yellow to blue, right? And when you're doing that, and it's a slow burn detective novel written style of like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which if you read the book, the movie has a little more action because they had to condense it for movie time, but the book, a lot of it is just 8 guys in a room. But they do a lot of the like John Le Carre is the real master of this, of bringing someone's mind into a visual space, of painting with words what the mindscape is doing. And so comics give you the benefit of actually being able to make that visual landscape through helps of the penciler, the inker, and the colorist.
Yep.
Not me. I don't know what I'm doing. Listen here, guys. I'm giving pages, or I'm giving a script, and I will sit there and turn it upside down because it makes no sense to me, and then I'll rough it out, and then I'll come back to it tomorrow and look at it like, what was I thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I must have been hungry. My blood sugar was low. I better redo that. But I mean, there are techniques like I'm just all joking aside, like to create, like you said, for the Illuminati book, you have to, as an artist, you have to take those like dramatic, like shadows, those dramatic lights and darks to like create that sense of suspense. And me personally, like I've said it before, I'm a huge Western fan. I also like the old noir stories, like the old James Cagney movies and whatnot. And so the idea of like the PI and like the just playing of shadows and all, mostly because I think they're more black and white movies, and just you have to use lighting, you know what I mean, to set your tone. You have to like know. And I'm of course by far no master, but like I definitely will watch like the older noir movies and whatnot.
Oh, I love
just to get a feel. Like
yeah.
what are they using to set the tone? Like where's their lighting coming from, and how are they playing off the shadows? The old classic Universal Mummy with Boris Karloff. Did that. They did a lot of when Imhotep was using his like mind powers, you know what I mean, on his love. There was a lot of like spotlight shadow play on his face, and like the wrinkles and the lines and everything. Just like there's not a lot when he's just sitting there going, "You will follow me," you know what I mean? But you have to use your lights and shadows. You have to use your shadow and highlights, you know what I mean? To really like give an emphasis just like to the intenseness of what he's doing and what they're doing. And like I feel as a penciler and an inker, you want to bring carry that light idea, that concept over to comics, because just as well.
I'm in the middle now of watching an artist do that with gray scaling, right? I mean, a local artist here in Fort Collins, a guy named Joe Arnold, right? And fellow new to the business, but he's worked with Mike Barron on several projects in the past, right? And he's basically doing my 130-page Brother Bones, the Undead Avenger graphic novel, right? Which is a mix of gangsters and horror movies, all melange put together, right? So early on, when he started doing pages and everything, we were going back and forth with this thought about, well, we're going to do it black or white, or we're going to do it in color. And I was pushing for color. I was like, okay, let's maybe modern audiences will like it better with colors and whatever. But Joe kept hanging on to this whole idea of like the Warner Brothers gangster movies and the Universal Arts. They're exactly the same thing, right? He goes, Ron, let me grayscale like the first 5 or 6 pages and see what you think, and we'll go from there. Well, he totally convinced me. He 100%. I mean, literally, those pages look like they came out of a 1945 Universal horror movie. All right. I mean, light gray, dark gray, shadows here, the angle of his composition, where the characters are coming from. those pages are creepy as hell. I am absolutely loving them. All right. I mean, honestly, I think fans are going to love this thing when it's finished. But kudos to Joe. He got it. He got what could bring the story up to the whole other level than anything even I imagined. All
Yeah,
right?
that's the first thing I noticed when I think you posted pictures of it or pages.
I put up a page today.
Like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a couple of them on my blog this Friday because I'm having a hard time sitting on these. I want people to see this stuff. It's absolutely.
Yeah, he did a great job on them. Like I was, scrolling and whatnot.
Not a lot of artists can do that kind of stuff. Believe me. All right. It's a trick. All right. I mean, you have colorists who are really great at what they do, but grayscaling, that's a balance. You got to be really careful. Yeah.
Well, you gotta kind of
Go ahead.
turn around and go, well, yeah, that whole push is for color and all that, but if you turn around and you backtrack, what would the impact have been on young Frankenstein,
right?
Had it been in color?
Yeah,
it would
right.
have been completely different.
Yeah, right. You'd have lost the whole vibe completely.
Yeah,
totally.
That one is in my top 5 favorite movies. Like I will watch that. Skipping through anything, like any TV during the holidays and whatnot. I will
it's that and Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
Yep.
Oh yeah. But again, the same feel. All right. Yep. They wisely understood the vibes that Universal created, and they kept them, which was so brilliant. I mean, give Mel Brooks credit. All right, Brooks is a genius. All right. I mean, the movies he's made are hilarious, and they still stand the test of time.
Absolutely.
What's he doing? What, Spaceballs 2?
Dude, he's working on
Spaceballs 2.
No, I read
for
that he every time they asked because obviously at the end it's talking about but they had asked him like, oh, when are you going to do Spaceballs 2? When are you going to do Spaceballs 2? And what he used to say, like, whenever the marketing comes through or something like that. But they never one of the other things I read was like there was no merch. One of the things he agreed, like I guess he argued or not argued, but negotiated with Lucas about kind of parroting stuff. He goes, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Go ahead and do that all you want, but no merchandising. So that whole scene in Spaceballs where Yogurt is selling merchandise or whatnot, that's all just a play because there was no actual merchandise from the show, from the movie.
Yes. I think that is a good jump off point because next week we're talking about comic gimmicks, and part of that is, of course, merchandising. So different things you can do to help sell your comics at conventions, online, or what have you. Or if you're lucky enough to have sold a property that's done well and now need to look at how do you market it, that part of that's probably going to be merchandising. That's how the big three, I'm going to include Dark Horse in that, make all their money now, essentially.
Merchandise.
That's the reason why most of them are giving their comics away for free. It feels like if you do one of their reader subscriptions. Like I said last week, it's definitely cheaper than how my old subscription box used to be.
Do they still do subscriptions? I remember for a birthday, I was given a Deadpool and Cable subscrition, like a 1-year subscription as a present.
Yeah, you can still do like a drip subscription from essentially them, but most of them now recommend you just go onto their online app and subscribe to their entire catalog.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. You don't get the physical ones that way, but you do get the digital library that is 80,000 deep at this point.
Listen.
Yeah.
What I find interesting about some of those, though, is I've run into quite a few just looking at like the Marvel that there are actually quite a few of the comics that are not in there, and those are specific when you start dealing with crossovers, like what is it? When I was looking at some of the Krakoa stuff, I think one of the books crossed over to Savage Conan or something like that, though.
Yeah.
With licensing and all that, they didn't. And when I was reading some of the stuff about it, it's because some of the licensing requires that if they are in your digital, then they get a certain percentage of everything within your digital. So you do have some things that that you won't have. Like one of them, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but you cannot find. It's probably because of the whole trade that they did of characters and all that, but you cannot find the Negasonic comic that came out just recently, within the last year.
Yeah.
And it's not available on digital. It's printed.
Yep.
You can do that, but it's just interesting the way a lot of the stuff with the digital, how you don't have access to some things and other things because of very key things. But
And they're doing some things to try and like get good terms to get that available for everyone, because I know they did a weird deal because like last year they had the Avengers versus Aliens storyline that already wrapped up, but it's coming out as opposed to only being 3 months behind like the rest of the catalog. They're doing it one issue every so many months, because that way that's the agreement they have with the rights holder of Aliens, that they'll do it that way, and then they can break up the royalty payments for that licensing as opposed to dumping it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
So they're, and like I said, nothing beats having a friendly local comic shop and being able to go in and pick up your books that way.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. But if you're like me and you live in a city where unfortunately, the owner passed away, unfortunately, and no one else has taken up that mantle yet, you still got to read comics.
Yep.
I'm just saying, Tim.
That's where you get them sent to you.
Yeah.
All right. On that sad note,
well, that's about. We'll be back next week talking about comic gimmicks and all that fun stuff. So I'll be talking about foiling covers. Perhaps I'll even get a little bit into the history of how that nearly bankrupted the industry in the 90s and why we had to have the anti-hero resurrection that saved Marvel. But
I just have one word to say: chromium.
Chromium.
Yeah. So we'll be getting into all that and how to make wiser choices when deciding on your gimmicks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
But we'll be back next week. But until that time,
Make
mine
Silverline.
Hi, I'm Dave Dorman. Make mine Silverline.